All right, welcome. I am Lee McMinn, and this is the SoftChalk presentation, basically. We were asking at the beginning, which I didn't get on tape, we were asking how many people in the group knew anything about SoftChalk, had either used it, seen it, heard about it. And it was more on the no side. Some had heard about it, but never used it. Some had seen it, but never used it. So we have a good presentation here to show you a little bit about SoftChalk. And basically what I'm going to do is just sharing my screen. We're going to look at SoftChalk at a SoftChalk lesson after it was created, and then go backwards, see how it connects or how you can link it into your LMS, whether you use Blackboard or D2L, Canvas, Moodle, whatever. And then what you can do as far as the design goes, creating a lesson and how your account works in SoftChalk. So let's take a look. I'm going to share my screen. And this is what a SoftChalk lesson looks like. Now they can take many forms. All SoftChalk is, by the way, SoftChalk is a lesson creator, all right? It is a tool that lets you build interactive lessons. That was one of the reasons we went for this. Greenville Tech has been using SoftChalk since 2015, 2016. Probably middle of the year 2015, I think, is when we got it. We do have a college-wide account, so all of our instructors can set up an account. They don't get one by default, but if they want to create an account, they can using the access code that we have. Now, again, we went with it because it is interactive. It lets you create interactive lessons. The color scheme, we kind of created a template for the Greenville Tech to follow with our Greenville Tech green. Some of the items that you see here on this screen can vary. I like to show the page numbers at the top left here. At the bottom of each page, we have different navigation options. I like to show the next or previous pages as well. You can put titles in the upper right-hand corner, as you see here. This is lesson 6.1, Law of Sines, and it's for the Math 111 college trigonometry course. You can put different, page, different information over on either the right or the left-hand side. Here you can see an example of attachments that you can put on a lesson. You can also put other blocks for like more information or links to web pages to get more information or other things like that. There's lots of different banners or things you can put here over on the right-hand side. I'm not finding the right words right now. But as you can go through a lesson, what you can do in the lesson is you can include images, you can use tables, you can embed videos from different resources like YouTube, Vimeo, or places like that. You can use I Teach Math. You can use equation editors to input mathematical equations. And this is the interactive part, these try these. Now, the try these is just my name for it. You can call them whatever you want. But here you can put these information and sorry, I'd already had this lesson open. Anyway, here's an example of these questions. You can have them pop up in a separate window, or you can embed them within the page if you wanted to. I like to have them pop up, so it kind of takes the student out of the lesson for a minute while they answer these questions. They can read the question, post their answer to the question, and then click check their answers and see if they got them right or wrong. Now, for this particular lesson, the students can retry, so they would just click retry, and they can choose another option and check their answers and see if they got it right. And then you can provide feedback, and they can get points for these interactive pieces in here. Now, you can let these points be reported to your grading area in your LMS. For example, we use Blackboard. So in our grade center, we can set this lesson up so that these grades report back to the grade center for this particular lesson. It's a lesson as a whole because we have multiple try these. Most of my lessons have one on either every page or every other page. So basically it gives you a running score. So you can see here at the top right that right now I have a score of 5 out of 55. Right? I can read through this next lesson. I can open up the next try these and I can solve this problem. I'm just randomly selecting some answers, which students may do to see if they get them right. I'm not even really reading the question. I can check the answer and look, my random selection, I got 1. All right, so another 5 out of 15. You can see here in the shaded out area that my score has gone up to 10 out of 55, which I've got a 10 out of 25 points so far, and that's my score. So I can go through the entire lesson, and when I get to the end, it will, when I complete the last question or the last page of the lesson, the score will get reported to Blackboard in this particular case. Now, this is what a lesson looks like after a student or after a user gets into it. Before we jump over to Blackboard, basically your lessons are stored in your SoftChalk cloud account. And this is what our instructors would create using the access code that we have provided for them that they can get. They would create their account. They can build their lessons with an application, and then they would save those lessons here to the cloud when they're ready. And you can see here that I have multiple folders. This is the lesson that we were just looking at, the law of sines. And when you come here after you've published it or posted it here to your cloud account, you can see a preview of the entire lesson right here instead of opening it up. You can see information below the lesson of who created, the name of it, when it was created, when it was last edited, what version of SoftChalk this particular lesson is using. Version 11 happens to be the latest one. And you can see how large the lesson is if you were to download it and save the lesson as a whole locally. Over on the right-hand side, you can do some minor editing of the lesson here. Basically, this is just like text editing. You cannot edit these interactive questions. I don't think you can do embedded files and things like this. It's just some basic editing that you can do online. To really build a lesson, you want to use the SoftChalk Create tool, which I'm going to show you in just a little bit. Here you have 3 link possibilities. The regular hyperlink, that's what we were just looking at. You would use this in your LMS if you did not want to capture the score. All right, so that's how you would use that as a basic hyperlink. If you wanted the score to be reported to your LMS, you would use the LTI link. And then if you wanted to embed the lesson in your course, you could use the embed code. The drawback with this is with the embedded lesson, you cannot capture the scores into your grade center. So I always use the LTI link because I want my scores to count. One that reports to the grade center that shows me that the student is doing work. I have record of it and those sort of stuff. And I'll show you how you can check that through your grade center as well, because you can see the student's progress and how they answered those questions. All right. So that's some of the options that you have there. So let's jump over. We're going to be looking at Blackboard because that's the LMS that Greenville Tech uses. Basically, when you post a lesson, whether it's a web link or you use the LTI, you're creating a web link basically. Now, since we're using the LTI where the grade reports, when a student clicks on it, on the link, it goes straight into the lesson. But I'm in as the instructor of this course. And when I click on the link, it's going to take me to an intermediate page, which is what we're seeing here. With this intermediate page, and we're looking at a live course, we can see that the learners here, that I've had 23 learners go through this lesson. I can see what the average score is. They've all scored 100, which is not surprising. Down below this, I can see what the average score is, what the class percent correct is for each of the quiz groups. All right, those are those learning activities, those interactive activities, and if I allow them to retry it. So in other words, they could have retried it multiple times until they got a perfect score. Then we can see here the students' names, how many attempts they had, and how they did on each of the quiz groups. And if I wanted to see how they answered, I could simply click on the check mark, and it shows me the question, the possible answers, which one was correct, and what the student chose as their answer as well. And that's quite helpful. So if a student misses a question, I could come in here and look at that. All right. Now, if I wanted to move on as the instructor through Blackboard to see the lesson, I would click on the lesson title here at the top. I also have scoring methods. This scoring method right here, I can choose how, if I want to change the scoring method, I can choose the first score, the most recent, the highest score, or the average score of all their attempts. By default, it's the first score, but we choose the highest score. So I want them, this only counts as a small percentage of their final grade. All right. And you can set the number of attempts if you want to let them. I give them unlimited attempts, but you can set it to 1, 2, 3 attempts. However you want to set that up, that's totally up to you. And you can change, if you see some students in here that you're at the end of the semester and some students have kind of left, they didn't complete it, they just left it open, maybe they haven't had a score report yet, you could choose to complete all attempts, which basically will close out all the students' attempts and give them whatever score they have at that particular time. All right, so that's how you can view lessons from the LMS. Now, from the LMS, like when we report to the Grade Center, hold on one second. I'm going to pause or stop the sharing for just a second, because while you can see some students' names there and the score of just that one lesson, I really don't want this to show up in the recording as I'm going to hide some information. All right, so let me reshare some more. All right, so here you can see in Blackboard, I've hidden the students' names here, but these are the lessons, the 4.1. If I scroll down to see the 6.1, which was the law of signs we were just looking at, I can see this is where their grade was reported. I can see the students that did not have it. I will manually have to come in here and add a 0 for them not completing the answer. But in Blackboard, I cannot really see their activity here. To see their activity, I've got to actually here now, this used to not do this. This is an update. It takes me in and I can see it, but notice it takes me to that page that shows everyone. So I would have to know which student I was looking at and then search through the list and find that particular student. But at least it pulls me here. So that's one way that you can come back to this page. Now I'm going to have to get back over because this is one thing I don't like to come to the Grade Center to do it. I have to back up a couple. There's not a quick way to jump back to the course. But you can see this is how it reports the grades to the Grade Center and what you can do with it. All right. Now let's talk about creating a lesson. How are those lessons created? And that's using a tool called SoftChalk Create. Now, once you get a SoftChalk account, you can download this SoftChalk Create tool. It looks a lot like Word, or maybe an older version, a slimmed down version of Word. It has an icon like this that says, I call it the South Carolina app because it says SC. But this opens the SoftChalk Create lesson builder. I have opened up that law of signs lesson that we were looking at. Notice here that in Create, the Create side of it looks much different than the saved version or the completed version. Notice you don't see the green banner across the top. You don't see the navigation pages. What you do see is you can see the page breaks right here, all right? And that's telling me that it breaks from one page to the next. So if I need to edit page 3, I'm gonna have to know what material is on page 3 and scroll down till I find the page 3 material. And then I can make some edits here as I'm going along. The great thing about this, if you have lessons already typed up in Word, you can copy the entire Word document and paste it in here. About the only thing it does not do is insert these page breaks. You would have to manually come in and put the page breaks in, but that's not a big deal either. So you can do those things. And it brings over headings, headers, those sort of things. It brings over tables and all that. It brings over images. When I was building this lesson, I was typing it in straight here. But in the Create tool, you have several things you can do. Again, you can assign headers. Like you can see here, the law of signs is using a heading 1, right? And you can put in bullets, numbers, or bulleted points. You can put in tables, those sort of things. Now, when we talk about this widget, this placeholder, that's where I embedded a video from YouTube. So I would insert a widget, and when I do, I'm just going to edit this one. You can see here where I pasted the embed code that I copied out of YouTube. And then I put in the name. This is the name that this particular video has. And the description is optional, but I put in who the owner of the lesson is and what material that it's covering. All right, and you would save that. The other thing is these interactive tools. That's under the insert. These are the interactive tools. You have something called a quiz popper. A quiz popper is a single, just one question that you can do. That's what I call it, a popper. And you can see here the question types. Now, essay, short answer, and feedback questions cannot be graded automatically. You have to go in and grade those. I don't use those question types in my lessons because I want the students to have that immediate feedback when they click submit or check answers. I want them to see that. If you had a short answer question or an essay question, they're not going to get a check to their answer. Okay, they would have to wait for you to grade it. So that's why I don't generally use those question types. A quiz group. A quiz group lets you create multiple questions. That's what I normally use. You can add more than one. I don't know that there's a limit. You can put a bunch of quiz questions in there. Now, with the quiz group, like what I have here, you have some different display options. All right, I have mine pop up from an icon. You could embed it in the lesson. All right, that means that it's going to actually, these questions will be part of the lesson. A lot of people like to do that, and that's okay too. Some use a pop-up from clickable text, meaning instead of it seeing an icon, it's just whatever text you type in right here. They would click on that text and then it would open up. I like the icon, and I like to have it pop up from the icon because then it opens up in a separate window, and it kind of grays out or dims down the background. So they're just focused on those questions for the quiz group. So that's one thing you can do. Now, the other things that you have under insert here, let me jump off of that, is these activities. These activities, many of these can be gradable as well, can contain a score. All right. You've got things like crossword puzzle. These are great for definitions. Spelling, good for word search, maybe. Our biology department, especially for anatomy and physiology, when they want to label things, we can use labeling or drag and drop, where they can put different images of the anatomy and have them drag the labels on to label the pieces. You can make it so that if they don't drop the label on the right one, it doesn't stick, if you will. All right, so those are really nice to do. You can do hotspots questions like click on the appropriate whatever, and you put an image in there and you can put a hotspot on the image and they can click the image. If they don't click in the right place, then they get it wrong. If they click in the right place, then they get it correct, and those sort of things. So there's lots of neat things like that. Things like the slideshow, I don't really use. This is like a mini PowerPoint in there. It's okay if you want to show pictures of different things, labeled pictures of different things. Maybe if you were talking about some, I'm going to use geography as an example, maybe some different sites, some different national parks. Let's use national parks as an example. You could take pictures and you could just show them different pictures of the national park. If you, however, you wanted to label things like Mount Rushmore and maybe the heads on Mount Rushmore, you want to label those, then you would use a labeling activity. All right, or maybe a drag and drop where they would drag the labels on or drag the items on top of it. Those are good things as well. So these are very interactive, and you can, again, make them gradable, scoreable, if you will. The tooltip, have you ever seen where you go into a web page, you see like a link, you put your pointer on that word and it gives you a drop down definition of that word? That's what the tooltip is. Accordion is like an accordion menu. So like you could have something minimized, show maybe the definition or show something, and then when they click on that item or click the drop down, it would pop open some more information about that. That's kind of what the accordion is. Then you have the page breaks. This is where you would insert page break. A SoftChalk cloud item, that's really neat because what you can do is you can put files, you can put images, you can save them in your SoftChalk cloud account. And if you wanted to then embed those in a lesson, this is what you would choose here, is that cloud item you would go and get. So you can also put other images. The neat thing about images, for example, this is an image here, is when you insert an image, you have the alternate text, and notice it says required. This is new since I built this. So now I need to put that alternate text in here. So I can say triangle ABC with A equal 35, B equal 40, right? And side C is 10. Put that in alternate text in there, and now that's going to show up if I save it and push it back up. So I can save this back to the cloud. Here you can see I already have alternate text. If you don't put alternate text in on an image, all right, it's going to give you a warning telling you you really need to do this. All right. So now that I've modified this lesson some, I can save it. And when I save it, I'm going to save it to the cloud. That's going to push it out to my SoftChalk cloud account. I select it, I click save. It's telling me, yeah, it's going to replace it. I'm okay with that. And now it's going to push this updated change out there. I don't have to change the links in my LMS, in my course, or wherever the links are. It's automatically updated. So now if anyone clicks on the link, they're going to see the updated version. All right, that's the great thing about it. You don't have to republish it or re-put it out there and anything like that. So I can do that. Right. So while that finishes saving, there it is. I get the confirmation. Now I can close the save window, and that's been updated. So that's really helpful. The other thing is you can do some spell checking. You have the tools to spell check, but let me warn you, this is one of the, I'm going to call it a drawback, in my opinion. When you do a spell check, it's only checking what you have here on the page. It does not check inside of these items that you've inserted. So I've created all these quiz questions here. It does not check the spelling inside of these interactive parts. So what I generally do a lot of times is I will type that up in Word, spell check it there, and then copy and paste it over. That can be a little tedious, But one thing I also did is when I first built these lessons, I was teaching the class in a face-to-face mode, and I used these lessons with that. And what I did is I had the students proof it for me. I said for each lesson they go through, they can, if they see spelling errors, to please mark those, tell me where it is, what's misspelled or whatnot, and I would give them 1 point per correction. And then what I would do is I would give them up to 5 points per lesson. And once they did, I would give them up to the 5 points. And I had multiple students that did it. Now, it always seemed that my better students were the ones doing it, which really didn't need the extra credit, but they got it. And it didn't hurt because it was only applying to these lessons, and these lessons as a whole, all of the lessons all together, which there were like 25 or 30 per course, only counted 10% toward their final grade. So while they did get the extra credit, it wasn't enough to where it's going to jump them an entire letter grade or anything like that. Or it's not going to move a student from an F to an A for doing this little bit of extra credit. But it was very helpful for me. They felt good about it. They were excited about it. I even had one student that did screenshots and highlighted and marked, and it was unbelievable. So you can get your students to help you out when you publish lessons like this as well. All right. So that's basically what you can do with SoftChalk, and that's what we had. So anyway, that's what you can do with SoftChalk, and how you can create lessons. Again, once you complete typing your lesson up, I always suggest that you save it locally, all right, and then save it to the cloud, which is what you just saw me do. Now, there's other things you can do. You can package the lesson. You can SCORM package the lesson if you wanted to send it out, all right. You can also publish these. Now, when you publish the lesson, you're done. You can't edit it anymore. So what I generally do is save it locally and then save it with one name. And if I want to publish it where I'm going to put it out there for the world, that means anyone can come and search SoftChalk and they would find that published lesson. I'm going to have a backup that I can edit, because once you publish it, you cannot edit that anymore. So I haven't really published any of these lessons to put them out there where the world can find them. I have shared these. I have put all of my links, the LTI link and the hyperlink, in a spreadsheet, and I'm happy to share this with anyone in South Carolina or our group. I've even shared it with some of our high school math teachers as well. And you can use them however you want. Now, I did mention earlier, and let me look back at the SoftChalk Cloud website. Here in your lesson, SoftChalk has a score center. So we use these for many of our career talks, nursing, our medical lab and technology courses, radiology, some others that are required by their accrediting agency, that they have to do career talks, and they have to show that the student completed it with a certain success rate, if you will. They have done their career talks in SoftChalk, and they have assigned them to a score center, because many of the students taking it are not Greenville Tech students yet, and so they don't have access to Blackboard or whatnot. So these career talks are outside of our LMS, but you can assign a SoftChalk lesson to a score center. And when students use the hyperlink that they post on any web page or they email out, they go through and it captures their score and all their activity in the score center. And then that score center information can be downloaded to an Excel spreadsheet and shows pretty much the same thing that we saw through the LMS, how the student answered each question, what their score was on the score center, and those sort of things. And it shows that they completed it with date and time and all that sort of good information that they have to report, so, or have to have if they're asked for it. So these can be used outside of an LMS. All right. So if you're watching this recording, if you have any questions about SoftChalk or want to know more about SoftChalk, you can, of course, go to the SoftChalk website, which is just softchalkcloud.com. right? Or you happy to get in touch with me. I'm Lee McMinn. I'm one of the Blackboard administrators here at Greenville Tech, and I'll be more than happy to share any information with you about SoftChalk. So that's what we have. All right, now some of questions that were posted in the chat area as we were going over this, we had some questions about, one question was, does this work on iPads and iPhones? Meaning, can someone access a SoftChalk lesson with an iPad and iPhone? And the answer to that is yes, they can. My daughter is a big iPhone user. She doesn't have an iPad, but she has taken courses from Greenville Tech while she was in high school, excuse me, and she did most of them on her phone. And I know she completed several lessons in SoftChalk with her phone. So yes, I know for sure it does work on iPads and iProducts. It doesn't really matter which browser you use. So that was a big question that we had. And again, the answer to that is yes, it does work on Apple products. All right, so again, if you have any questions, feel free to get in touch with me. And that's what we have about SoftChalk.